and welcome to another podcast for Green Scene Daily. I'm Aaron Hillis, and my special guest today is British satirist Chris Morris, the co-writer and director of Four Lions, which just premiered at the 2010 Sundance Film Festival. Mr. Morris, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
So, pardon the pun, this is quite a radical comedy. I was hoping if you could briefly tell our listeners what the film is about.
Well, it is very briefly about a bunch of jihadis who set off on an ill-advised course and watch the wheels come off their wagon one by one. That's it in a nutshell. Do you want a longer version?
No, that's perfect. I really absolutely love this film, and at times my laughter was quite uneasy. I wasn't sure if it was okay to be laughing. Now, I certainly don't want to suck the fun out of the room by talking about intention, since I don't think Four Lions is so much a controversial film as a controversial comedy. I'm sure I'm not alone, but I'm curious how reluctant you feel to discuss the film with people.
Well, here's the thing, right? The film was born, at least in part, in the context of an almighty war of words around the whole issue of the war on terror, terrorism, conflicting ideology, all the rest of it. And it's a major bun fight, and it's still going on, whether it's in the political realm or the blogosphere or around people's dinner tables at home or whatever. It's a big, sizzling war of words. And I wanted to make something which communicated outside that, and therefore to an extent, this film is an attempt to step outside that arena and communicate, well, obviously, some jokes, some ideas, and maybe some insight in a totally different way. So I feel it would be slightly perverse to step back into the very arena I was trying to distance myself from in making the film. Because I think the film can work on a visceral level and through jokes, just a totally different form of communication. So that's basically why I feel it would be mad to try and explain in sound bites what the film's about, which is what would tend to happen if you sit around too long talking about it. The other thing you could say is I don't know what it's about.
There's actually a really great quote I found, of all places, on Warren Ellis's website that apparently came from your office. It was, "Terrorist cells have the same group dynamics as stag parties and five-a-side football teams. There's conflict, friendship, misunderstanding, and rivalry." I mean, for me, the film is a farce. I mean, it is stepping back. It's a farce about just how every human being is ridiculous in their own ways. I mean, is that a fair interpretation?
Well, I'd say you've hit something there which is common, yes. I mean, it is the case that small group dynamics have been identified as the sort of key to understanding how these cells work. What do small group dynamics mean? It sounds a grand term, and if you're looking at it clinically from the point of view of an intelligence agency, it helps you plot what people might do if you're trying to understand how a terrorist cell works. If you look at it from the other side, from the inside, you're going to find petty behavior as well as anything else. If you look at any of the cases which have been studied or written about, you'll find, even in the Hamburg cell during the plotting of 9/11, ridiculous things happened. The other members of the cell would tease Mohammed Atta because he was so uptight. They'd walk him deliberately through the red light district because they knew that would wind him up. They called him the Ayatollah because he was so strict. They used to, weird things. They used to tease him when he went to the bathroom and he took a piss. Basically, it was loud, and they'd tease him for that, and then he'd say, well, these are bloody Jewish doors. Obviously, I've put that into English, but he would blame the doors for being Jewish. So there's kind of all these petty rubs going on. And actually, if you I went to court cases and you listen to the surveillance recordings of guys sitting around plotting their nefarious business, there are all kinds of petty things. There's a great bit in a court case where these guys are talking about a car program on television and about whether they like it or not. They both basically like cars. And then it goes, conversation breaks off, sounds of wrestling. And it's Sounds of Wrestling for 9 minutes. Then it says, out of breath. Hey, that was a great fight, wasn't it? Yeah, bro, that was great. I'm glad I won. Hey, you didn't win, I won. What? And then 10 minutes more, Sounds of Wrestling. And you just think this is sort of a very ridiculous kind of step away from what you were expecting to find. And I think that is part of the small groups dynamic thing, is basically petty arguments and treading on each other's toes.
For all the absurdity in here, I mean, it's a very naturalistic film as far as just the way people interact. How did you and your co-writers, Jesse Armstrong and Sam Bain, research the film?
Well, I went on a long toddle. I basically walked around went around, visited as many different people as I felt I needed to in order to understand both the wider context for this, which is to say, understand Muslim culture in Britain, which I'm not saying I achieved fully because it's a highly, highly complex and very balkanized system, actually. You have virtually every place you visit has a different tone because, I don't know, maybe they're Pakistanis, but that doesn't begin to explain it. They might be Mirpuri Pakistanis or Kashmiri Pakistanis, and they come from each individual village has settled in a different place in a different town. Now, you have all of that cultural baggage smeared through a couple of generations, so it's kind of changed with time, but you have vestiges of it there. That's a broad context, and then within that generally benign setting, tiny little pockets of fierce radicalism. That research was a long undertaking. During that time, I would have meetings with Sam and Jesse, and we would just brainstorm funny ideas. As often as not, I'd say I met someone who this. For example, I met a white guy, who used to be in the BNP, an extreme right-wing organization, and used to go around beating up Pakistani lads. He then decided he was going to get more subtle, and he was going to mess with their minds. So he bought a Quran so that he could beat them at their own arguments, and accidentally converted himself. So he basically accidentally converted himself. And that guy ended up being a sort of poster boy for a Muslim radical organization. Now, I would come back with stories like that and say, where can we go with this? So it was a kind of a series of conversations based on the research before we started writing and scheming the story. And I'd kind of drop in characters and then we'd see where we could go with them. And we spent a lot of time before we actually began to write a single word of dialogue.
How do you work with other people in the writing stage?
Sitting around and trying to make each other laugh.
Simple as that?
I think if it gets too far away from that, you're in trouble. So I think that's where you keep forcing funny ideas into the center of the room. Sometimes you can have a lot of as you can tell from the way I'm talking, you can have a very rambling run up to that point. But as long as that's what you keep trying to do, then you're heading in the right direction. And it's great fun because things occur to people in different ways. And if you collaborate with people who are good, you get ideas included in the story which would never have occurred to you in a million years. And that's fantastic.
For American audiences, I'm sure parallels are going to be made to In the Loop, thanks to the political humor and the rapid-fire wit, documentary-style camera work, and just the fact that it came out last year. You've, of course, worked with Armando Iannucci, so I'd be interested to know, from your take, how you think you two differ in your comic sensibilities.
Well, I think the thing with Armando is that I found when we work together and when we do work together and, or even just sit down and talk together, that I suppose we share quite a lot of sensibilities. And basically comes down to kind of going, you have common tastes and you have common reactions to things. We probably sit around frowning quite a lot whilst we're desperately squeezing out comedy ideas. I think it's just you have, at an intuitive level, it's like other people, Peter Bainham and various people I've worked with, just an intuitive level, you just feel, yep, I understand. And you go somewhere. It's like you're sort of on you find that between you have a sort of working vehicle of some kind.
How would you describe your on-set demeanor? I mean, how do you prioritize?
You're asking the wrong person there. I was told the other day at the Q&A that we were talking about. I mean, we'd run long takes. The actors are fantastic. They basically just got so tightly wound with the rhythms of their characters that you could really play around with it a lot. And we shot with 2 cameras. I think that's partly why the look of the thing evolved. I mean, I would basically call action before everybody was ready. And, if something occurred to me whilst a conversation was going on, we had a hard copy for the script, so we knew what the safety version was, but I might just chuck something in. Go over there, say this, punch him, or whatever. And we all, I don't know, everybody else probably thought it was a royal pain in the arse, but to me, with shooting on tape, 2 cameras, being able to pick up every reaction, is absolutely fantastic. It gives you just a very, very sort of live set of raw material. So the short answer is absolute pain in the arse, probably, is how mine's been on set.
Because of the content, I mean, was it hard getting the film funded? I mean, I heard that BBC and Channel 4 were both too nervous to take it on. That's
a great myth, or not a great myth, a rather feeble myth, but not strictly true. I had conversations with both of them, and obviously Film 4 is part of Channel 4, so that busts that one. The BBC were never actually engaged in a conversation about taking this on, though I did talk to people at the BBC who sort of gave me some helpful and some less helpful